It was a difficult period, the hardest I've ever known, but somehow we found the strength to carry on.
She lived in a quiet little town where life moved slowly, almost too slowly at times. To anyone passing by, she looked like any other grandmother, with grey hair tied neatly, soft eyes hiding 1,000 untold stories, and a gentle smile that made people feel safe. But behind that smile were years of pain that no one could see. She had spent most of her life learning how to hide her scars. Not the ones visible on her skin, but the deeper ones that lived in her heart. When neighbors greeted her, she would nod and say she was fine. Inside, though, she felt heavy, carrying memories she wished she could forget. Every night, when the house grew still, she would sit by her window, staring at the stars, asking herself if life would ever give her peace. She had once believed in happy endings, in love that lasts, in a family that never turns its back. But life had shown her otherwise. Betrayals came from places she never expected. The people she trusted the most were the same ones who broke her heart the deepest. Still, she said nothing. Silence became her closest friend. It was safer that way. It felt better to hold her pain inside than to let the world know she was hurting. Yet even in her silence, she longed for more. She longed for freedom, not from others, but from the prison she had built inside her own heart. Deep down, she hoped that one day, she would find the strength to step into the light again, to live not as a broken woman, but as someone who had survived. Time passed, and her silence only grew heavier. She began to wonder if speaking her truth would even matter. Who would listen? Who would care? The people around her seemed busy with their own lives, too distracted to notice her quiet suffering. She often sat on her porch, rocking gently in her chair, watching children run down the street, their laughter echoing in the air. She remembered when she used to laugh like that too, before the world taught her to be small, before her heart learned to carry weight it never asked for. Sometimes she felt like a ghost in her own story, alive but unseen, present but unheard. The walls of her home felt familiar yet lonely, and she often whispered to herself, "Is this all there is for me?" But one day, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a small moment that held more power than years of silence. She woke up one morning, looked at herself in the mirror, and for the first time, didn't turn away. She saw the wrinkles on her face, the tiredness in her eyes, but also something else, a spark that had been buried but not extinguished. It was the spark of survival, the same strength that had carried her through countless storms. And in that quiet moment, she realized something important. She may not be able to change what happened to her, but she could choose what to do with the life she still had. That was the day she took her first step forward. It wasn't easy. Her hands shook, her heart raced, but she decided she would no longer let silence define her. She began with small things. She cooked meals she hadn't made in years, filling her kitchen with the smell of home. She tended to a little patch of earth in her yard, planting flowers that bloomed bright against the dullness of her days. She smiled at strangers in the market, not out of habit, but because she wanted to. Each act, no matter how small, became a part of her healing. Slowly, the prison walls around her began to crack. The more she allowed herself to live again, the lighter she felt. But the hardest part was still ahead. She knew she had to face the truth she had kept buried for so long. Speaking about her pain was terrifying, but holding it inside was worse. So one afternoon, she gathered the courage to share her story with a neighbor who had once asked about her silence. Her voice trembled, her hands shook, but she spoke. To her surprise, the world didn't fall apart. Instead, the neighbor listened, nodded, and even cried with her. For the first time, she felt the heavy weight inside her chest begin to lift. That moment changed everything. Once she began to speak, she couldn't stop. She shared her story with others, not to seek pity, but to show that survival was possible. People who had once pitied her began to admire her strength. Young women in her community came to her for advice, sitting by her side as she told them, "Pain does not define you. What you do with it does." She became a quiet leader, someone who carried wisdom not from books, but from lived experience. She turned her trauma into a torch that lit the way for others still in the dark. Life began to taste sweet again. She laughed in her kitchen, danced when no one was watching, and sang old songs she once thought she had forgotten. The joy she thought was lost forever slowly returned, wrapping her days in warmth. She realized she was no longer just surviving, she was living. And with every sunrise, she thanked herself for not giving up. She thanked the broken girl she once was because without her, she wouldn't be the strong woman she became. Her story became more than her own. It became a legacy. She showed her family, her neighbors, and even strangers that trauma is not the end of a story, it can be the beginning of strength. She proved that no matter how dark the night, morning always comes. And as she sat once again by her window, looking at the stars, she no longer asked if peace would ever find her. She knew the answer. Peace had been within her all along. All it needed was courage to set it free. She soon noticed that people began to come to her quietly, one by one, with their own heavy stories. They sat on her small porch while the kettle sang. She poured warm tea and listened. She did not rush them. She did not try to fix everything in one day. She only said, "You are not broken. You are hurting. There is a difference." A young mother came first, scared and unsure. Grandma helped her make a simple plan, one safe friend to call, one bag to pack, one promise to herself each morning. Later, a teenage boy came who stuttered when he spoke. She told him to breathe with the birds at sunrise, slow and steady, and to practice by reading out loud to her garden. On Saturdays, a few neighbors started gathering near her gate. They shared small wins, like getting out of bed on a hard day or making one brave phone call. Grandma called these little lights. She said little lights make a big room bright. She wrote simple notes for each person to take home, just 3 steps, nothing more. Soon, the street felt softer. The people felt less alone. She was not a hero in a movie. She was a kind friend with open hands. That was enough to change many lives. Joy did not return in a big jump. It came like morning light through a thin curtain. She played old songs on the radio and swayed as she stirred the soup. She baked bread, and the smell filled the house, warm and safe. She took short walks to the corner and waved at the same dog every day. The dog wagged his tail like he knew she needed that hello. In her small garden, green leaves pushed up with courage. She laughed when tiny tomatoes showed their first blush of red. Children from the street helped her paint her fence. They left little handprints at the bottom. She said they could stay there forever because children should know they are welcome. At night, she wrote simple lines in a notebook, "I am here. I am safe. I am proud of today." She learned that forgiving herself did not mean forgetting what happened. It meant laying down the heavy blame she carried for so long. It meant telling the mirror, "You did your best with what you had." The bad dreams came less often. When they did, she put on the kettle and sat with herself, the way she would sit with a friend, gentle and patient. Joy stayed longer each time, like a guest who had finally found a home. As the seasons turned, she thought about what she wanted to leave behind. Not money. Not things. She wanted to leave with courage. So she saved seeds from her best flowers and wrapped them in small paper packets. On each, she wrote a few words, "Plant when you are ready. Water with hope." She gave them to anyone who needed a new beginning. She also recorded short voice notes on an old phone, simple messages people could play when days felt dark. Breathe. Drink water. Take one step. Call a kind voice. She taught her granddaughter to plant a young tree in the yard and said, "A tree grows slow, but it grows strong." So will you. She wrote letters to her future self, too, promising to keep choosing life, even on quiet days when the world felt grey. People in town began to say that if you needed peace, you should visit the grandma with the garden. She always had time. She always had tea. And she always had a way of finding one small door of light in a dark room. One evening, she sat by the window again and looked at the first star. This time, she did not ask for peace. She thanked it. She had built it, day by day, with gentle hands and brave choices. Then she whispered for anyone who might need to hear it, pain is a chapter, not the whole book. Turn the page. Your light is waiting.